The information contained in this presentation does not replace the crisis management system used in your district. Additionally, it will not cover the use of physical restraint. Let's go. Hey y'all, welcome to this webinar, Step Out of the Storm, Understanding Crisis. My name is Monica Kurtz and I'm a behavior specialist here at the Service Center for Region 13. What we're going to talk about today, something everybody needs to know. We're going to talk about what happens when we go into crisis and what we can do to help other people, specifically our students. We're going to start with this slide. Isn't it pretty? I made this slide especially for you. Whenever you see this slide in our presentation, I want you to take a deep breath in and then let it out really slowly like this. Can everybody do that? Let's do it one more time. Do it with me this time. Doesn't that feel good? We're going to do that throughout the presentation, throughout our webinar, and that's going to help us stay regulated as we talk about dysregulation. How clever is that? So let's roll on, shall we? Let's take a look at this. Haim Ginott was an Israeli psychologist who's well known for his studies into the relationships between parents and their children and teachers and their students, right? Let's look at what he has to say. I've come to a frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element in the classroom. It's my personal approach that creates the climate. It's my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess a tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized. Let's sit with that for a second. I want you to think about your life as a parent, your life as an educator, your life as an adult who plays a role in some child's life, right? And think about the power that you have in that child's life. It's overwhelming, isn't it? We try not to think about it too often, but it's there, it's real, and we need to take that into account, and we need to use our power for good. What do you think about that? That's what I thought. All right, so what are we doing here today? Why are we here? So like I said, we're going to talk about crisis, right? We want to understand how crisis evolves and what can we do as the adults in the room, what can we do to assist students, right? As you can see from the slide, my pro tip, there aren't a lot of pro tips because really they're all pros, right? You're all professionals. But the pro tip here is to look beyond what you can see. Right? So for each of us, right, how we act is a manifestation of how we are feeling inside, right? So we need to sometimes look past a student's behavior and look to see inside what's causing that behavior. Because until we understand what's causing the behavior, we can't really help, right? We can't really help. Anger looks like anger looks like anger looks like anger, but on the inside of anger could be fear or shame or embarrassment, right? And until we can fix that fear or shame or embarrassment, we're not going to deal with the anger, right? So always look behind what you can see. So here's what we know about crisis. First things first, behavior patterns are real. I happen to know that behavior specialists all over the country, we spend hours looking for behavior patterns, right? We look to see where a behavior happens, when it happens, what time of day, with what specific purpose. We want to know everything that there is about a student's behavior, right? So that we can figure out ways to address it. Those patterns are real and they have meaning. For example, right? If you say to me, my student every day after recess comes into the classroom kicking and screaming, right? Every day after recess, that's the pattern. Right? So we want to look at what is it about recess or the transition from recess back to class that's making your student have these issues. So look for the patterns. The second thing, if you can see it coming, you can head it off at the pass. If I walk into your classroom to do an observation about a student and you say to me, do you want me to set him off? Which has actually happened to me. I will, of course, say no. But that tells me, though, that you can anticipate when a student is going to become upset, right? And you probably know about it in your own home. If you think about life with your partner, with your spouse, your husband, your wife, your kids, you probably know what's going to set them off, right? For example, I know in my own home, right? If I come home and the dishes haven't been unloaded from the dishwasher, the heads are going to roll, aren't they? Right? Because that's my expectation. And everybody knows this, right? So you know in your family what are the things that are likely to cause people to be upset, and you probably know in your students what are the things that are likely to cause them to be upset. And those are the patterns that we want to look at, right? If you can anticipate the problem, you can nip it in the bud. If I know, for example, that these two students go into the cafeteria every day, and every day they have issues because they sit at the same table, well, what can I do differently? Exactly. I will ask them to sit at separate tables, right? Because I can anticipate what's going to happen. I'm just going to head them off at the pass, let them go eat on their own, right? If you can see it coming, you can fix it. If you can anticipate it, right? The other thing that we know is that all of us experience crisis. We're not different from our students, right? We have issues too. We get mad, we get frustrated, we get sad, and we react to things in our environment when we're feeling like that, right? Just like our students. So if you can put yourself in your student's shoes, right? Oftentimes you can kind of figure out how to help them based on even just what you know about yourself and what makes you feel better when you get upset, right? Additionally, and here's the last thing, right? Crisis looks different for everyone. When I get upset, and when I get really, really upset, I stop talking. Right? So if you are ever around me and I very suddenly go silent, you need to clear the room, right? When I get upset, I stop talking. I once had a student, though, who, when she got upset, she started to giggle very nervously, right? And when you heard that giggle, everybody needed to clear the area, right? It looks different for everyone, right? Some of us, when we get upset, we stomp our feet, we throw things. Some of us go out for a run or a walk. Good for those runners, huh? I'll just be quiet in the corner. We all have ways that we respond to being in crisis, right? So we need to understand that for our students, right, they all look different as well. Remember that kid who giggles nervously when she gets upset, right? Does everybody giggle nervously when they get upset? No, they don't. So, you know, if I hear you giggling nervously, I'm not going to clear the room, right? Everybody's different. Everybody still with me so far? Fantastic. All right, so I want you to picture a wave. Pretend you're in Galveston and you're at the beach and you are watching the waves come in. Maybe you're a surfer. Any surfers out there? Not me. I'm not raising my hand. I'm not a surfer. But picture you're on this wave, okay? This is the wave I'm talking about. This image comes from a book by Jeff Colvin called Managing the Cycle of Emotional Escalation. That's what the whole book is called. I really like this image because it just illuminates so clearly to me what the cycle of crisis looks like, right? So we're going to take some time and we're going to go through each step of this cycle. We're going to talk about what it looks like. We're going to talk about what we can do to make things better, or at least not make things worse, right? Sometimes we can't fix it right away, but there are things that we can do to not make it worse. And we're going to look at each of these stages in succession and see what we can figure out. So let's keep going. All right. The first stage is obviously stage one. That's calm, right? If you picture a really nice day on the beach, that's what calm is. When we are calm, right? That's when we are going about our business. We are doing things that we like to do or doing things that we are engaged in. I mean, even when I'm doing things that I don't like to do, I can still remain calm at them, right? I'm not upset about anything. There's nothing in my environment that's bothering me. The temperature is perfect. The AC works really well. Everything is pretty much going my way. I am in a calm state, right? For your students, it means that they are sort of happily, busily going about their work. And you can hear that in a classroom oftentimes, right? Or you can see visually like that sort of hum of everybody working together, everyone communicating, getting things done. That's calm, right? Take for a second, think about two things. One, first, I would like you to think about what does it look like when you are calm? How do you feel inside when you're calm? And second, what does it look like in your classroom when your students are calm? How is that different from when they are in the cafeteria? What does calm in the cafeteria look like? What does calm when you're in the auditorium look like? Right? Calm can mean different things in different places. Right? So keep that in mind. Right? This is the time in your day when you really need to be actively connecting with your students. I mean intentionally connecting with your students, talking to them one-on-one, not about things necessarily related to academics or what you're doing in the classroom, but about things that interest them. You want to get to know your students because the better you know your students, the better you can help them through a crisis, right? This is also the time, and it's pretty much the only time, this is the only time you have to really establish classroom routines and to practice them. Right, so pretty much everybody knows we need to have rules in our classrooms. They are typically something like be safe, be respectable, be responsible. Okay, but what do those rules look like in action? As we enter the classroom, what does safe look like? What does respectable look like? What does responsible look like? You need to think about these things ahead of time, and you need to practice them with your students. Right? And I mean all your students. From pre-K to 12th grade, practice these with your students. How do we come in the classroom? What do we do with our backpacks? What do we do with our homework? Right? Where do we sit down? Where does our water bottle go? Right? What is the first thing we do when we enter the classroom? Right? The more your students know this, right, the fewer crises you're going to have. And this is the time to teach that. And in fact, in terms of that wave, this is the only time to teach that. We want to use what's called unconditional positive regard with our students. We want to engage with our students no matter how they're doing, right? No matter what they're doing. I don't care if you're failing math, and I don't care if you're the class clown. I need to connect with you human being to human being, right? That is unconditional positive regard. That no matter how you behave, I see you as a person, and I still like you as a person, right? And I care about what happens to you. That's unconditional positive regard. Everyone in your school needs to feel that unconditional positive regard, right? This is also the time for you to pre-teach expectations, right? For example, right, your class is going to the auditorium for the first time this school year. How do they behave when they get there? What should that look like? What do they do? If you're working in elementary school and your students are lining up to go somewhere, how does that happen, right? We are pre-teaching these expectations so that students know what to expect. What if you're going off campus on a field trip? Say, for example, it's October and you're going to the pumpkin patch. What can the students expect when they get there? How should they behave, right? These are kind of crucial conversations to have for your students because for many of them, they don't have experiences out in the world, right? So they need to know how to act and react in those situations. So this is the time for you to pre-teach those expectations. The last thing that we want to make sure that we're doing at this point in time is teaching replacement behaviors. So what are replacement behaviors? Any guesses? Yeah, they're the behaviors we would like students to engage in, right? Rather than those sort of undesired behaviors. Undesired behaviors can look like what? throwing a tantrum in Walmart, tossing a chair in the classroom when you hand out the spelling test, mouthing off at the teacher when they don't want to do an assignment. Those are typically undesired behaviors, right? This is the time now to teach students what to do instead of those behaviors, right? So we're looking at things like how to stay self-regulated, right? We're looking at good social emotional learning skills, which is a whole other webinar. We're looking at ways to maintain calm when I get upset, right? That involves a whole lot of things. What does it look like when I get upset, right? And what can I do to help myself when I start to feel that way, right? So we need to teach those replacement behaviors ahead of time. Once your student starts to escalate and starts to sort of ride that wave up, it's too late to teach replacement behaviors, right? Because as we start to escalate, that's when we need to start using them, right? So you can't, what do they say? You can't fly the plane as you're building it, right? Same thing. You can't teach the replacement behaviors as a student is escalating. So we want to practice them when we're calm. Everybody still with me? Fabulous. Let's rock on then. So stage 2, something in the environment is off, right? What could that be? Gosh darn near anything. It could be almost anything. It's too hot in the room. That's a common trigger. It's too cold in the room. That could be a trigger. I'm hungry. That could be a trigger. I'm tired. That could be a trigger. I don't like the person sitting next to me. That could be a trigger. The person 2 rows across from me is tapping their pencil. That could be a trigger. There's a whole host of them. And just like every crisis is individualized, so is every trigger, right? The same things don't bother all the people. So let's take another minute. It's actually going to be a few seconds. Think about yourself again. Think about what are the things that sort of set you on edge? What are the things that bug you? Can you imagine them? You know what bugs me? People who chew with their mouths open. I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm gonna have to leave, right? No, I don't have to leave. I have more skills than that, but everybody's got those things, right? Everybody has a different tolerance for the things that bug them, right? So same way with students. They've got things that bug them. And once those things are introduced into the environment, right, that's when a student starts to get agitated. Right? A lot of what is going to be a trigger can depend on your past history, right? So you could assume from my distaste for people who chew with their mouths open that maybe I have a past history with somebody who chewed with their mouth open. You would be correct, right? That's what I'm talking about, past history. Right? Something may have happened in the past that you're not even aware of, right? That's going to set the student off. This is particularly relevant when we're talking about students who have experienced some kind of trauma in their background, right? They are going to come to us with some things inside them that bug them, that really, really bother them, and they may not even know it, right? But it's there. So think about a student's past history when you're looking at triggers. One of the things that your behavior person is going to look at is what are the student's triggers, right? The better that we can take those triggers away, the better we can address the behavior. So, and in fact, I have just spoiled my whole line here. So here's what we can do, right, to help the student is remove the trigger if you can. Right? There are some things that we can do. If a student shows up into your class and they're kind of hangry, you know, like they need something to eat so they can get on, can they have some crackers? Right? Can they have some peanut butter? Can they have a little carton of milk? Right? That would be removing the trigger. Remind students of the expectations, right? I get that you're feeling hangry. I'm going to give you some crackers here in a second. But remember, what do we do when we come in the classroom, right? What's the appropriate way to enter my room? You still have to address the trigger, but now is a good time to remind people of expectations, right? Remind students of the skills they have learned. Because remember, back in stage 1, in the calm stage, right, we talked about teaching replacement skills, So we want to make sure that when the problem arises, that we're reminding students about the skills that they have practiced. Hey, remember we talked about when you start to feel like that, try counting backwards from 10. Maybe 20 or 30, depending on how upset the student is, right? If you're chewing with your mouth open, I'm going to start at 100 and probably work all my way back all the way to 0. So now is not a good time to be nagging, right? It says on the slide, just don't. As a general rule in my life and in my professional world, I'm against nagging. No one likes it. Particularly, nobody likes it when they're starting to get upset, right? So that constant, you need to calm down, you need to calm down, you need to calm down, you need to go do your work, go finish your work, go do your work, go finish it. That is really annoying, right? And that's not helping the situation, right? So just no nagging. This is also not the time to be judging or belittling the student. And what do I mean by that? Using sarcasm, never appropriate. Because most of your students don't understand sarcasm, right? So it's just hurtful. It's really just hurtful. And that's not what we're here to do, right? So we don't want to judge or belittle the students. Oh my gosh, how old are you? What grade are you in? Right? Are you in kindergarten? Do you need to go back to kindergarten? Right? No, that's not okay. You're just being mean, right? That's never okay, never. Are there any questions about whether or not to use sarcasm or belittling the student? Okay, fantastic. Let's move on. Stage 3 is agitation. So there was a trigger in the environment, and as much as you tried, you couldn't get away from it, right? It's still there, it's still bugging the student, and epic fail on our part. So here's what it looks like, right? The trigger is still there. Maybe it's something you've identified. Maybe it's something you could have fixed, but you didn't get to in time. Maybe it's something you couldn't see. Maybe it was something inside the student that wasn't obvious. But your student is becoming increasingly upset, right? At this point, the student may start to transfer their frustration from the original problem, right? The original problem was, I'm hungry, right? We didn't fix that in time. Now they're escalating, and they may transfer that frustration with being hungry to you. You're the problem now, right? That's not a bad thing necessarily, particularly if the trigger was another student. You would rather have the student frustrated with you than with a peer. Does that make sense? Right? They may start to actively avoid the work, whatever the work is, even if the work isn't related to their trigger, right? Because remember, the trigger was, I'm hungry. That has very little to do with math. And yet, the math is going to pay the price for me not having breakfast this morning. Does that make sense? Are you still with me? They're going to start trying to avoid the work. They might start trying to avoid you, right? There may be some pacing around the classroom. There may be some head on the desk action, right? Some hoodie over the face kind of thing. I am going to completely avoid you in order to do whatever it is you want me to do, right? They might start to challenge your authority, right? Who do you think you are? You're not my mom. You're not my dad. I don't have to do what you say. So many of these are correct. I am not your mother. I am not your father, right? There is some expectation that you have to do what I say, but clearly now is not the time to argue about that, right? Now is not the time to argue about that. We want to focus on helping the student be less anxious. We want to redirect their energy into trying to help them choose choices that are going to be more positive, right? So when you're giving choices for a student, no matter how old they are, right, you want to limit it to 2 things. The more that we become upset, oh, this happens to all humans, it happens to you, it happens to me. The more that we become upset, the less able we are to make good decisions, right? And too many choices confuses us. Right? I read an article once that said the more choices that people have, the more likely they are to be unhappy with their decision, right? So if, for example, if you are in the condiment aisle at H-E-B and you are looking at salad dressings, how many salad dressings exist in the world? Like a lot, lots of them, hundreds in just my H-E-B. Hundreds of salad dressings. I don't know which one to pick, right? Should I go with the ranch, traditional ranch? It seems like a good decision. We also like blue cheese at my family. But then there's Green Goddess. I've never had Green Goddess. I wonder if that tastes good, right? Then there's a mixture of all of these things. There's jalapeno ranch and jalapeno Green Goddess. And I don't know. So I'm going to go with the jalapeno Green Goddess, and chances are I'm not going to be happy with it. I should have gone with the jalapeno ranch, right? If I had had two choices to begin with, there is ranch and there is blue cheese. Well, then I have a 50-50 chance of being right, don't I? Right? So that we want to keep that in mind when we are offering choices to our students, right? Two choices at the max. When you're creating these choices, we need to make sure that they are two things that can happen right now, right? The choices are not, if you do this, then your mom's going to buy you an ice cream, right? You can't predict if mom's going to be able to buy ice cream, right? That's not a decision. Your choice is you can do this math problem or you can do this math problem. Those are really great, right? And they give students some agency, some ability to make some decisions, to feel in control. So you need to make sure that the choices are two things that you can make happen right now and that are two things that are appropriate to the situation. Does that make sense? Fabulous. Good idea at this point to start breaking down your instructions. Again, as we escalate, and this goes for all of us, the more upset we get, the less we are able to take in visual and auditory feedback. So people signing to us or people speaking to us, we're not able to process that information coming in, right? So break down the instructions of the assignment into smaller chunks. Step one is what? Let's go grab a pencil, right? Step two, we're going to sit at our desk. Step three, we're going to do problem number one, right? That's it. Right, so it's not a huge laundry list of things that have to be accomplished right now, but it's very short and it's very simple. Another great technique to use right now is called speak and retreat. So what happens when you speak and retreat is that you approach the child and you say, "Student Monica, I would like you to begin writing your thesis statement and I will come back and check on you in 3 minutes." And then you walk away. Right? You have to do the walk away. This is very, very hard for grown-ups, and I get that. You have to do the walk away. You have to wait the allotted time that you said you were going to wait, and then you get to go back and see how things are going. Because again, nobody likes a nag, right? So standing over your student going, "Write your thesis, write your thesis, write your thesis," is not going to help the situation, right? That's not going to help the situation at all. So speak and retreat. Approach the student. Tell them what they need to do very succinctly, very simply. Walk away, right? And then go back and check on them in a little bit. As you're using that speak and retreat, it's also a good idea to use start directions instead of stop directions, right? If you've ever been around a young child, we use this really commonly with young kids, but it actually works for everybody, right? Start writing your thesis is far more effective than stop tapping on the table, right? When you say stop tapping on the table, you're putting all of the focus and attention on tapping on the table. And guess what's going to happen? There's going to be more tapping on the table, right? So when we say start, right, we take that negative behavior or perceived negative behavior, we push it to the side, and the start is the thing that you want to do, right? Start doing your math problems. Start your spelling quiz. Start your assigned reading, whatever it is. Does that make sense? Also, really, really important right now is to watch your body language, right? How are you holding your body? Are you standing in front of the classroom like this? "I told you to write your thesis." Right? How does that look? Does that look inviting at all? Did any of you want to write a thesis statement at that point? No, probably not, right? What if I'm standing above the student and I'm bearing down on them with my hands on my hips saying, you have to do your math. You need to pay attention to me. You need to pay attention to me because I'm the teacher in the classroom, right? What's my face doing? Is that very inviting? No, it's not. Be aware that as people get upset, right, they are paying more attention to how your body is talking than what your voice is actually saying, right? So your body language and your tone, either your signing tone or your vocal tone, have to match what it is you're saying. All right? All right. Any questions on agitation? No? Fantastic.